Yesterday, Candace, you talked to people who are living along the water dealing with flooding. Now, today you have info from two professors who have been tracking and measuring the increased rainfalls. And they say it's not just a nuisance, it's also hurting the environment.
Yeah, and it might be a sign of kind of things to come here over these next several years, kind of as we go further. The duration of heavy rainfall events have been increasing across the state of Illinois. So far this year, 2019 is the fourth wettest year on record for Rockford. Now, two NIU professors looked at just how much the rainfall has increased, the impacts on agriculture and water resources, and if the heavy rainfall is becoming more common due to climate change.
As you think about future climate change, the idea of climate extremes, what happens at either end of the tail, those things are going to become more common over time.
Those extremes are happening across the United States, including here in northern Illinois, with more longer duration heavy rainfall events.
These events are occurring much more frequently, especially in the last 40 years since 1980, than they occurred in the first 80 years in the record.
That record dating back to 1900. NIU professor Dave Shagnon and assistant professor Victor Gensini studied 5 and 10-day consecutive heavy rainfall events across Illinois and noted the increase, especially during the winter, spring, and summer seasons annually. The increase in the heavy rainfall can have major impacts on agriculture and water resources.
If you get really heavy rainfall over 5 straight days or 10 straight days, they prevent people getting in their fields, whether it's to plant or harvest crops. More importantly, for water resources, we're worried about impacts on flooding of rivers and streams across the region. When you have these longer periods of heavy rain, they tend to provide the opportunities for you to get a river above flood stage and perhaps for a longer period above flood stage.
While this study didn't specifically look at stream flow records, Scott Lincoln, senior service hydrologist with the Chicago National Weather Service, said that stream flow in the Rock River, measured at Rockton, has increased over 75% since the 1950s.
So the river is being given more water to pass that point at Rockton than it used to. It can't go out because there's land, it can't go down, it has to come up.
More water in the Rock River means it doesn't take much to reach flood stage. What used to take 4 feet of water to reach flood stage in the 1950s is now a little less than 2.5 feet. Back in the 1950s and 60s, there were pronounced dry and wet seasons on the Rock River, but those dry periods are becoming fewer and fewer, with the wet season expanding.
It's just hard to say if it's going to stick around, it'll just be the new normal. Are we going to stay this wet all the time? But an increase in rainfall, it is consistent with what we expect in a warming Midwest climate.
A warming Midwest climate. It only takes a rise in air temperature by 1 degree to increase the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere by 4% at any given time.
So as you increase temperature by degree, you increase the amount of water vapor exponentially that can exist. Doesn't have to exist, but can exist in the atmosphere. So as you warm the temperature of the atmosphere, you literally give that atmosphere a greater chance to hold more water vapor in it.
This means higher dew point temperatures, especially during our growing season. And according to Dr. Shagnon, there has been an increase in the amount of water vapor since the 1950s, shown by higher dew point temperatures. While some of that could be attributed to an increase in evapotranspiration from corn and soybean crops in the Midwest, it is also a sign of a warming climate. The 10-month period from January to October of 2019 was the second warmest on record, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, with combined land-ocean temperatures 1.69 degrees above the 20th century average. The warmest January to October period just 3 years ago in 2016.
A lot of the expectations of what climate change could do to our climate in the middle of the United States is to lead to greater frequency of extremes, which are part of the hydrologic cycle, whether it's maybe more periodic droughts that last month or 2 or 3 months, or these heavy rainstorm events that create short-term flooding.
I asked Dr. Shagnon if he thought these heavy rainfall events would become more common.
My guess is yes. If you sat there and said, well, they occur more frequently down the road, no. You're going to have some years we're going to have a lot more of them, some that are going to seem what I call normal to what you and I grew up with.
As our climate changes, the idea of climate extremes becomes more and more of a reality, and this could have major impacts on all of us.
Especially when you think about precipitation events, whether it's too few or too many, those are things that are going to have huge impacts on our economy, on agriculture, on water resource systems, all that kind of stuff in the Midwest, and by gosh, by golly, that could be really impactful to all of our lives.
Now you can see the impacts the heavier than normal rainfall has had on agriculture and, just as Dr. Shagnon said, water resources this past year and a half, with a delay in spring planting and fall harvesting and the higher river levels. Now it's hard to say whether or not, this next coming year will be the same or the years thereafter, but the idea that this pattern may continue is something we really should be all aware of, and just, take note that you might not see it here in these next couple of years, but several years down the road, things may be changing, and it could exactly be a result of our climate changing too.
All right, thanks, Candace.